I would like to consider rather closely the term bed-wetting grandson. As I have already pointed out, it is not grandchild, but grandson. And in all probability, the person is an adult. Bedwetting is involuntary urination during the night. It is an embarrassing dysfunction of the body. But I would say that the bedwetting, the embarrassing dysfunction of the body of the grandson, is a metaphor, is a symbol for the overall dysfunction in the family. When you read the poems of A.K. Ramanujan, you realize that speaker after speaker is positioned in a family which is dysfunctional, which is disorganized in all respects. And the bedwetting of the grandson, the bedwetting by the grandson, is not only a fact but also a symbol. There is a strong scatological element in the poetry of A.K. Ramanujan. I would like to go a bit further and say that A.K. Ramanujan was the person, or at least one of the persons, responsible for introducing the scatological into Indian poetry in English. Until the days of Nizam Ezekiel and A.K. Ramanujan, the scatological was taboo. Can you imagine Sarojini Naidu writing about defecation, or Sri Aurobindo waxing eloquent on urination? It was A.K. Ramanujan who demonstrated that poetry can be generated out of seemingly very unpoetic areas of life, the scatological being one of them. A.K. Ramanujan demonstrated that there is nothing to be ashamed about the scatological, and there is a very strong scatological element in his poetry. And you can be asked to write a short note on the scatological element in the poetry of A.K. Ramanujan, especially if you're writing an advanced level examination like the civil service examination or a pre-doctoral examination. I shall give 3, maybe 4 random examples of the scatological in the poetry of A.K. Ramanujan. There's a poem titled A Lapse of Memory. And in the poem, A Lapse of Memory, we come across the lines, I quote, "The smell of a woman's perfume in a childhood latrine," unquote. The smell of a woman's perfume in a childhood latrine. And in the poem titled Eyes, Ears, Noses, and a Thing About Touch. I repeat the title, Eyes, Ears, Noses, and a Thing About Touch. There is urine on Lily. Urine on Lily. In Pune Train Window. That's the title of the poem. Pune Train Window. Occur the lines, see a man defecating between 2 rocks. See a man defecating between 2 rocks. And in small scale reflections on a great house, stanza 14, yes, stanza 14, we are informed that the women who come as wives of the boys of the great house belong to illustrious houses themselves, so illustrious that they obviously do not have toilets, washrooms, and the women answer the call of nature in the open. The exploration of the scatological by A.K. Ramanujan in his poetry was very much part of the revolution, the great revolution, unleashed by the early post-independence Indian poets in English. And it was a revolution which believed that life has to be viewed in its totality, that no aspect of life ought to be ignored, and that poetry can be generated from all aspects of life, the scatological included. Let us now move to the second stanza. A house that leaned slowly through our growing years on a bent coconut tree in the yard, being the burning type, he burned properly at the cremation. So this is one of the things left by father when he died, when he passed away, when he passed on. A house. An attempt can be made to relate the house here in the second stanza of Obituary with the house which stands at the center of the thematic structure of the even more famous poem, Small Scale Reflections on a Great House. It's quite possible, it's quite probable that the house referred to here in the second stanza of the present poem is the great house, the so-called great house. Here we get a detail about the house which was denied to us in the poem Small Scale Reflections on a Great House. A house that leaned slowly through our growing years on a bent coconut tree in the yard. The house is such a well constructed house as we could expect of the great house, that it gradually leans over the years. To lean means to incline, to move into a sloping position, to move away from the perpendicular. The house leans slowly, gradually, through our growing years. As the speaker and his siblings grow, they are babies, they become children, then they become adults. The house, which in all probability is the great house spoken of in Small Scale Reflections on a Great House, gradually leans. It not just leans, it seeks the support of a coconut tree in the yard. And the coconut tree itself is a bent coconut tree. So here we have a great house, so well built. I am of course being ironical, that it starts leaning over the years and seeks the support of a coconut tree, which itself is a bent coconut tree, which itself is not a straight coconut tree. Perfect symbolism for the state of affairs in the family of the speaker.